Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of Old Scribes, the podcast for the mature sports fan, as we like to call ourselves. Today, first, I want to introduce my partner in crime, Matt Aguilar from Chicago, Illinois. How things holding it down there in Chicago, Matt?
It's getting
Everything good?
cold. Starting to get cold. I'm glad I'm indoors.
Yeah, I still have my shorts on today down here in Florida.
Okay.
And we,
I'm jealous.
and we want to welcome our special guest today, accomplished ring judge, very well known, very respected judge during her career, long career. And I also know her as a passionate Jets fan, probably more so than even the boxing, since I see you on Facebook all the time going to games. And Julie Lederman, glad to have you on Old Scribes podcast today.
Thank you. It's glad to be here.
I'm in Australia about a month ago, and I'm watching television, and the NFL games come on Monday there. Like the 1 o'clock Sunday game is about like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning in Sydney, Australia. So I missed those. But when I wake up about 8 or 9, I can catch like the second game about halfway through the 4 o'clock games. And then after those games are over, they start televising the 1 o'clock games again. And so on this particular Monday, the person I'm staying with, Gary Michael, he was up at 5 because he's a pool guy. He builds pools. And he tells me, oh, the Jets couldn't get a first down for most of the game. And I said, oh, okay. So I'm sitting there watching the 1 o'clock Jets game. And sure enough, they hadn't accomplished a first down till like deep into the second quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually thought at the time, I wonder if I know she's at the game, and I wonder if she's pissed off. That actually occurred to me. 2 seconds later, the Jets get the first down, and guess who the cameras pan to? Julie in the crowd with the "oh my God" finally expression. I thought it was priceless. So just wanted to tell you that. You probably got a bunch of calls on that.
I did. My fiance Max DeLuca, who's a boxing judge, he's currently a boxing judge, is also a Chicago Bears fan. So he's not a fan of Aaron Rodgers. So I was texting him. I moved down to the front row, and like I used to do when I would follow my dad around to the fights, and I would be sitting upstairs, and I'd move down. So I have good seats, but I moved down to the first row, and I was texting him. I said, if they don't get a first down, I'm going home. I said, this is, I don't know what's going on. I've never seen a game like this. So my reaction was, oh, finally. And I said, oh, no. I said, I saw the camera guy, and I said, oh, no. Then, he's texting me, and then my phone's blowing up. I'm like, oh, no, like, what are they, And the week before, I don't know if you saw the week before, the same thing happened. My friend and I, it was the first play when, Aaron Rodgers and we didn't get a first down, and it was like 3 and out, and we put our hands over our faces. And my friend was wearing a green hat, so a lot of people recognized her green hat. Yeah. And they said the Boo Birds are coming out already. And then you see us with our hands over our faces, and again, people are going, there you go again, because we were in the first row. Same thing when Rodgers went down with the Achilles, first row.
So what do you think about that when they put you on television and I don't know, you feel like you're expressing the feelings of most of the fans in the stadium, or do you wish they hadn't put you on camera?
I mean, I love the Jets. I love my football team. I'll always be loyal to my football team. But the funny part is I'm getting more notoriety now for the Jets from being, involved, going to all the Jets games, going to the away game, going to Hall of Fame, than boxing.
Wow.
I mean, it's hysterical. It's hysterical. People from everywhere, my dad, was an original season ticket holder. So, when we used to go all the time. Then when he became so busy with HBO, he couldn't go as much. And then when I became so busy with the boxing, I would miss a lot of games. So then when they went to that personal seat license, he spent a lot of money on the personal seat license. So when my dad passed, when he got sick, he went, near the end. When my dad passed, I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to do all those things with the Jets that we never got to do together. So as boxing started to die down, which it really did, I mean, with Showtime and HBO ending, there really wasn't any big fights. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't want to miss any more Jets games. Like I grew up going to all the games as a little girl, going to Shea. I said, and I went to the Hall of Fame because I I'm a huge fan of Darrelle Revis, as you probably know. My dad was too, and I wanted to see Klecko. And while I was there, I ran into Jay Glazer, and I was talking to Jay Glazer. He knew who my dad was, and I said, I'm really never really mourned my father's death. And he said, Julie, what are you doing about it? I said, I'm doing everything my father and I never got to do, which is mostly with the Jets. Like I went to the draft when Zach Wilson was drafted. I went to, I'm going to the away games. I'm doing all these different things for the Jets. I was on Good Morning America. The Jets are calling me to do different things. So, I feel like this is my way of saying, hey, Dad, it wasn't for wasted all this money on the PSLs. Look what I'm doing. It's kind of like reliving something that we never got to do together. Because we used to sit home and say, Dad, how do you go to the draft? And he would think of his different connections with HBO. But again, he had all these fights, so we never got to go.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
but
awesome.
I love the football team. I mean, even when these things happen, I'll never give up on my team. I'll never be one of the ones that say I'm not going to go or that's it, I'm done, or I'm going to give up the tickets.
But what's this season been like? I know a lot of fans entered with high expectations. A lot of my good friends, especially in Jersey, are Jet fans, and they had high hopes. And to have the season sort of turn out the way it's turning out, what's it been like for a fan?
We have our diehard core that still get there at 8:00 in the morning, and then we tailgate. We will show up no matter what. But a lot of us really, when you think about it, first of all, they brought all these different players from all these different teams with all these different styles. Like they say styles make fights, and they keep saying that during every football game. They keep making all these boxing analogies. And as I sit there, coming from a boxing background, there's a few things that people aren't realizing. First of all, like Zach Wilson, for example, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. They keep talking about, maybe not Zach Wilson, but how well Sam Darnold and Geno Smith are doing. Well, guess what? If you take an amateur boxer, for example, and you don't throw them into pros and put them into a big title fight. They're doing that with these quarterbacks. And then people are like, hey, no, you're right. A guy comes out of the amateurs, which is like coming out of college. They're not going to throw him into a big, huge game like they're doing, a title fight like they're doing to these quarterbacks. With the Jets, they're taking Devontae Adams. You had Mike Williams thrown in. They're throwing them in all of a sudden. Let's bring this one in. Let's bring that one in. The coaching staff, I mean, we've had issues for years with our coaching staff. I mean, Adam Gase, we've had a lot of issues. So here you are throwing in all these players all at once, didn't have a lot of time to practice together. But the talent, I mean, the amount of talent, that's why people are getting frustrated. But you got to give it time. I mean, you got to get the right coaches. You can't say, okay, we're going to have a defensive coach and that'll be our head coach. You got to have coaches that are up to the level of the players. It's just like having a boxer. And as he gets better, they say, you know what? I mean, he needs a better trainer. So there are a lot of analogies to that. So, I mean, do I think they should give up on Rodgers? No. I mean, if you look at the last game, we were out-coached. A lot of games we're out-coached. It's like when you watch a boxing match, and my father used to say it all the time, the fighter had no plan B. The Jets in a lot of cases, like Bill Belichick, he always had a plan B. He would always, throw you off. There's no plan B. So I think that's why, I think it's a Jets problem. I think once they get the coaching staff down, I think we'll be in a lot better shape.
Yeah. Most definitely. I think they probably messed up the season when they fired Robert Saleh so early in the year. I mean, there was so much expectations, and to fire the head coach after five games, I thought was a little bit of a panic move. And then by putting the other guy in as interim head coach, you just basically ruined your defense. And it just hadn't got any better since then. So big disappointment.
Yeah, it's a very big disappointment because when you look at it, I mean, if you're, if you're playing the Jets, you have to worry about Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, I mean, and Aaron Rodgers. That should be a problem. But now, now look at our defense. People are criticizing our defense. So I just think next year, if we come in with a strong coaching staff, everybody has their own specialty, and then they all work together. Why is there a disconnect? Why is there problems with our clock management? Why are there so many false starts? I think if they work on that, and that's coaching, that's all coaching.
Speaking, do you have any preferences of who you want to see coaching the Jets?
You know what? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know enough about, I think it's got to be somebody experienced, yet it has to be somebody that will work with Aaron Rodgers and that will work, that will work well with him. I don't think a Belichick would have worked here. I don't think a Belichick style would have worked here.
Yeah.
With his history with the Jets or anything like that. I don't think that would have worked. I mean, I think they'll I worry a little bit about Tannenbaum being involved in finding our head coach, but
I mean, that's a bit strange there.
Yeah, that's very strange. That's
a bit strange.
I'd love to see Rex. I'd love to see Rex. I love Rex Ryan. I love Rex Ryan.
That would be interesting. I don't think that would be a bad choice either. I mean, It would be a lot of fun, that's for sure. But I think he could probably rally the troops a little bit, Do you know what
the problem is with Saleh, and that we all saw, is that he was just too calm. There was no sense of urgency. And again, the boxing analogy. When you see, you'd see a corner and the guy's losing, and the corner's not saying, "Hey, let's go." You're losing. The corner's just giving them the same instructions, and there's no sense of urgency. That was a problem with Saleh. Everybody loved him. He was a great guy, but there was no sense of urgency.
Yeah,
I feel like that's an issue with a lot of younger head coaches these days. Is that they're kind of lacking that sense of urgency and that fire. I mean, my era was the era of Ditka prowling the sidelines and getting into Harbaugh's face. That doesn't seem to. That certainly doesn't seem to happen anymore. So
I wanted to tell the story about your dad and Darrelle Revis. Remember when Revis was rumored to be traded that first time around, and he finally went to Tampa Bay? I think there was a fight at the theater at the Garden. I'm not sure who was fighting. So I'm covering the fight, and I'm ringside. You know how small it was, press row there. And your dad's there, and he just calls me, "Oh, hey, George, how you doing?" He goes, yeah, Revis just took a helicopter to Tampa Bay. I think he's going there." And I'm like, "What? He's going to Tampa Bay? What? I called the paper. I said, Harold Lederman just said that Darrelle Revis is taking a helicopter to Tampa, and he may sign with the team." And they go, "Okay, we'll check it out." So they checked it out, and they never ran the story because they couldn't get confirmation.
Oh.
And I said, "How much more confirmation than you need than Harold Lederman?" Okay. They didn't run the story. We got beat on the story.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I called from ringside. I've got the fight. I can't do the story, but I called in that, and they just didn't. So it was like the biggest story at the time.
Wow.
And we got beat on it because they didn't take the scoop from Harold Lederman.
Wow.
Yeah. So
if you could trust anybody, it's Harold Lederman.
Yeah. Now, nowadays, I'd have just tweeted it, right?
Right.
It just hit the tweet.
Right.
And send it out like that.
Back then, you had to file a story and get it attributed to somebody.
Right. Get confirmation, all that stuff. Yeah. But that was a lot of fun. He loved his Jets. No doubt about that.
And that's the whole thing. Like when my dad passed, again, Jay Glazer, it was such a kind person. We're standing at a cocktail party, and and it was just him and I, and we were talking, and I said, my father died. All of a sudden, it's rush. Everyone's calling me. It was more than I could imagine, and I never really sat down. I had to take care of my mom in the house and everything else, and I never sat down and really mourned his death.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying, and Jay's like, "Julie, what are you doing about it?" And I said, "You know what?" I said, "I'm going to do everything that we never got to do." and again with the Jets, and even like moving my seats down, and then like sitting in the first row, and then the TV thing. Can you imagine my father seeing me 2 weeks in a row on TV? And that would be my dad's expression with the finally getting a first down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be my father. My father would be like, finally.
Right. You did a bunch of fights in the bubble during the pandemic too, right? Did that weigh in your decision, having to be sort of in that environment for so long?
The bubble was tough. It was really tough. You had to really think about it, because you had to, you got there, you had to make sure you had your food before you went up. Like they were very, very strict, and I give them a lot of credit. I give them a lot of credit, Top Rank with the bubble, because they had it, they really had it down to a science. I mean, there were people on our floor to make sure that you weren't, escaping the bubble, because really you could have, if I would have went downstairs before, in between that time and gotten the virus and gone upstairs, I could have infected a fighter. So they were really, so we would just, I would get there, make sure I had, what I needed, then go upstairs, and then once I'm upstairs, I was upstairs, but I was going there twice a week, so it was a lot.
Right.
It was a lot. And when you think about how long, I mean, since I was in my early 20s, between New York, New Jersey, Mohegan Sun, Philadelphia. I mean, I was just every weekend we were, Steve Weisfeld and I pretty much, and Melvina, we were somewhere. So I really didn't have, and if I did go to a Jets game, I was exhausted. So I didn't have the tailgate. I didn't have, my weekends were just done. And then when Vegas, it was, sometimes the bubble was twice a week at one time, because that's all there was. But I think what hit me the most is when, HBO ended. I think, when it ended, my dad, when Showtime ended, I think that just hit me really hard too. And then when they stopped the club shows, because when you stop club shows, you also stop developing fighters, and you stop developing a place for officials to start, to work on their craft, to shadow. I mean, when you look at it now, a lot of the older officials are retiring. So, there's not a lot of club shows. I mean, Max, my fiance, worked a club show in Queens the other night, which is very rare.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is amazing. You would never think, 15, 20 years ago, you never would have said that in the New York area, right? There would be club shows all the time.
All the time during the week. I would leave right from work. I mean, I'm shocked. And I think that's what, kind of soured me on this, it made me sad, where I got all this excitement from going to the football games, But it's really, the state of boxing is sad. And I know there's a fight coming up in Brooklyn, so hopefully things will pick up. But, what fighters do people really know out there now? It's really sad. They know MMA.
Yeah. Just the other day, we were talking about that as well, and it's like boxing has changed so much. It was on, it was like Saturday. There was all these fights on DAZN, and it used to be that, I wouldn't miss a fight. I would try to catch almost everything that I could, and now it was like I don't even have a DAZN subscription anymore. So I missed all of the afternoon fights. I see all this chatter on Twitter about what's going on with it. And I just thought, you know what? I'll just watch the fights tonight on ESPN. And I don't know. There's there's just not the enthusiasm that I once had for it. And I think that has a lot to do with, as you say, there's no HBO, there's no Showtime. There's something about those networks and the people involved in it that got you excited about it, and I guess until now I didn't realize just how much they got me excited about it, because now I'm just like shrugging my shoulders. If I see it, I see it. If I don't, I don't.
But also too, what's sad is like a lot of the fighters, they're recycling. Like when you see the Danny Garcias fighting again, and I look at and I look back. And I think of, oh my gosh, like if I look back at BoxRec and I see how long ago I worked and how many of his fights I worked, and then you see those are the names that people know. Nobody really knows. Like Max and I watch the ESPN fights. I recently, got the zone so he can practice his scoring, because that's what he does because he's still judging. But his nephews, in the past they would be talking about boxing, and then now they're talking about the MMA. They're all talking about the MMA because it was MMA, on Saturday night. Even like Bart Scott. So I did this. The Jets asked me. They actually split the GMA, and I was on this GMA pre-show, with the Jets and the Bills, and Bart Scott was there. So I was talking to Bart Scott. He loved my father. He was very close to my father. And again, he's talking about back in the day, back in the HBO days, and talking to my dad and everything else, and he doesn't really talk that much about boxing anymore. I think I asked him about. I think it was one of the Beeville fights, and that he knew. He watched that fight, but again, and then as a fighter, really, do they have that strive to? Oh, I'm going to be on HBO. I'm going to be on Showtime. I'm going to make this money. That's another issue too. How are the fighters going to be making their money? Maybe Saudi Arabia. That's and again, as an official, a lot of the officials are going to have to go to Saudi Arabia now to make to work. Not everybody could do that.
What does that say about the sport here in the United States, in your opinion, in terms of because it really does look like that is the next chapter for the sport is there. So what does it say about the sport in America?
Exactly. I mean, and then again, if you don't have any club shows, okay, you're not developing fighters. If you're not developing fighters, who's going to be your next, say Miguel Cotto at the Garden on the member. I mean, every year, like we talk about it now, a lot of, people we're close with, Randy Gordon, Kenny Bayless were inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. And I said to Max, because, he's still judging, he's judging in New York. He moved here from California. I said, you probably have a fight that weekend. And now I'm like, well, I don't know, because Puerto Rican Day Parade, every year we would have a big fight here with Cotto.
No question.
Who's the next Cotto right now? Again, they kept looking to build up and find the next Miguel Cotto to take that spot in New York, and they haven't been able to. But without club shows, how are you going to? Who are you going to see? That's how they showcased John Duddy for all those years, because he would fight in those little club shows, and they would build him up, and then everybody knew who he was, and then the officials would get work. So how do you tell an official out of the amateurs? How do you bring him into the pros? You got to bring him into the pros, into the club shows. You let him shadow. You can't do that when there's no club shows. You can't throw, again, just like a quarterback. You don't want to throw him into a big, show his first, 3 fights.
Yeah. I remember writing a story about the new passage of the insurance requirements that for every show they had to have a minimum of, I think it was $1 million.
Yeah, the $1 million. Yeah.
A lot more then. And then, a lot of the speculation at that time was that the club shows were going to suffer because they couldn't really, match that kind of money to promote a show like that. And I don't know if it's changed, if it's gotten any better or any worse, but obviously, it put a penalty on a lot of the club shows that have to come up with that kind of money to put on young fighters and not really attract a big crowd. They would always attract a good crowd, but not necessarily a big crowd. And that was the life and heartbeat of a lot of the boxing in New York, those club shows.
The club shows, but also too, not even New York doesn't have club shows. I mean, Vegas doesn't have a lot of club shows. It's really everywhere. And then now think about it, okay? You have a club show, so a guy can say, well, if you win on this, somebody wins on this fight, or whatever, then maybe if they win a certain amount of club shows, then they'll eventually fight on it was HBO, Showtime. Now, where are they what are they striving for? To fight on, Amazon? Like nobody really, there's no direction to fight in Saudi Arabia, to fight in, it's just, it's not the same. It just doesn't seem like it's a scene, and then you can't just turn on Showtime now and watch a boxing match. You can't just turn on HBO and watch a boxing match. When with, the pay-per-view. I mean, and then another thing that was, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, and something I want to bring up is, and I know how my father would feel about it, is that whole Tyson Jake Paul. The whole world all of a sudden was talking about this. You know, all of a sudden boxing became relevant because an older Mike Tyson was fighting because it was Mike Tyson. In the meantime, I felt horrible, you know, watching it. I did barely watch it. I had to look away because I was this little girl that was, you know, at every Tyson fight, because my father was there in Atlantic City. It was at every single Mike Tyson fight. And here I am watching this. It's wrong to me. There's just something wrong about watching this. You know, somebody his age, it was wrong. And that people were celebrating it. It was sad. Like, is this what it takes for people to watch boxing? Now, what were your thoughts on that?
Oh, I thought it was, I don't want to say, it was kind of, trying to figure out the right word.
Money grab?
Far circus come to mind. I don't know what people expect. They complained and talked about the fight was rigged. I mean, it was a 58-year-old man who's lived a very hard life when he boxed and since he boxed. And for him to actually manage to go 8 rounds and be on his feet, I thought was a small miracle in itself. You know, the other guy is not a fighter, so it's not even really real boxing. And, you know, I enjoyed the Serrano fight. I thought that was great. If they'd ended things there, it would have been great for boxing. Even the Ramos fight was good. And then, I don't know. And then people expected more. You know, it was a show. It was an event. It was a come see, come watch. You know, and that's about what it was. It wasn't a take on boxing. It wasn't even boxing. It's like it was even worse than, you know, all these guys fighting MMA fighters and MMA fighters trying to fight boxers and all of that. It's like, I don't know. Why can't just fighters fight? And isn't that what they're supposed to do? Fighters fight, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Then you had 2-minute round. You had a 2-minute round.
2-minute rounds.
That it was just wrong.
Right.
Why was this even I mean, just to me, it was a how could have this been a sanctioned fight with 2-minute rounds for professional men? Like the whole thing to me was just wrong, and it was hard to watch.
Yeah.
Did you watch it, Julie? Did you watch it?
I turned away, and I said, "There's something wrong. There's something really wrong here." I just
what do you think your dad would have said about something like that? Because I mean, I think, you know, years ago we had Butterbean, right? That might have been like the closest thing to it, and he was, you know, by comparison, a much more like legitimate fighter. You know, what do you think your dad would have said of this current kind of state where these celebrities are fighting, you know, for millions of dollars against you know, basically old men like Mike Tyson?
My father would have thought it was horrible. I know my father. He would have felt horrible. He never would want to see Mike in that position at that age. He would have been upset that it was sanctioned. He would have, the whole thing with the 2-minute rounds and him fighting with the age difference. And him huffing and puffing and no reason for it. My father would have been disgusted because he would have thought like it's a joke, you know. It's making a mockery out of boxing.
Yep.
He would have been. I know my father. He, you know, Butterbean was at least fighting, you know, and he would fight people, you know, like you have a lot of heavyweights that were, you know, like Adam, you know, in New York, but not, you know, Konisky. I mean, he was a lot of heavyweights that are out of shape, but they're good fighters. You can't, you know, Ruiz, you can't, you know, look at a fighter by the way, you know, judge fighter by the way he looks. But this whole age difference, and then your reflexes are gone. You know, people talk about Aaron Rodgers at 41. This is a guy who is 50, you know, 50. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's sad. If your reflexes are gone and you're in the ring, that's dangerous. I mean, that's the first. And my father, you know, he was safety first. You know, my father was always safety first, and that would have bothered him.
Yeah.
So speaking of your dad, I'm sorry, George, go ahead.
I was just saying, hopefully we won't have to see anything like that again anytime soon.
But we probably will.
But we
Yeah, we
probably
probably will.
Yeah, but we probably will.
Just to switch gears, what was your first boxing memory with your dad?
I have, I have so many memories. I mean, I remember being in the lobby of a hotel, and Muhammad Ali was in the lobby, and that's when it was a huge heavyweight fight because he judged a lot of Larry Holmes fights. So back when these these big extravaganza, Hearns Cuevas, and I mean I remember us waiting for him to get paid, and that's when that whole Harold Smith he was walking through Detroit with a suitcase full of money, and I'm falling asleep in a chair waiting for my father to get his money, and he's waiting for this guy to come, and just after like Hearns Cuevas. I mean, just like crazy stuff. Muhammad Ali in the lobby of a hotel, and I'm this little girl, he's doing magic tricks. Us going to like foreign countries and have him grabbing me by the hand because we have to run out of there because the local fighter lost in Venezuela, or I mean, yes, I mean that's what I'm saying. So when people say like, did you get nervous going to Torreon, Mexico by yourself? And I said no, because my father took me to every crazy place. We were in Santiago, Chile. He took me everywhere, and I mean, not only did he take me, he'd show me, all right, this is what you do. This is the first thing you do. And if your driver doesn't show up, this is what you do, and this is how what you do, but not knowing I would ever judge, but just some of the crazy stuff that would happen, and where to be careful that they're going to try to, make sure, you get your expense money, and make sure you're careful and don't walk here and don't walk there. And when you're, done eating, go to your room, and, just how to handle yourself as a professional. Yeah.
Now, you probably faced a little bit of accusations of nepotism because we always have people who are jealous and, always got to complain about stuff. So how much of that did you have to face?
I actually got the opposite because when I started out, they were afraid to put me on the air because my father was, commentating. So I actually got held back longer. So I was shadowing a lot longer than most people did. In other words, when you sit there and you're, scoring, and then they're comparing your scores to professional judges, I shadowed and did more club shows than most people did because, they didn't know what to do with me, because here's my father giving his score. They never were faced with anything like this. So finally it was Foxwoods that said, you know what? And they put me in Holyfield Ruiz 3. I don't know if you remember that. So yeah, I had it for Holyfield. One person had it for Ruiz, and I had a draw. But that's when they threw me in. They said, "All right, she's fine," and that was the big bit. She's fine, and then everybody else trickled in, and then they didn't care anymore. But I always made it a point, and it wasn't that I was mad at my father, but I always made it a point that he was over there on one side. I was on my side. I didn't go running over to the table. Oh, hi, Jim, Larry, Roy, and Dad.
Right. How difficult, Julie, was it? I mean, boxing is predominantly men. How was it difficult for you? How difficult was it for you to break into that world?
Yeah, well, other people did before me, so it's not like I was the first. But you have to be tough. You got to be tough. And I think, coming from like a really, really strong mother who taught in the South Bronx, and growing up and having a father who always said you can do, whatever you put your mind to, and teaching me everything about every sport. I was, treating more like a son than a daughter. And so I think because he always looked at me, even with football. I mean, people are amazed how much I know about all these, different sports. If you handle yourself a certain way and you come across a certain way and you know when to leave and know when not to stay around, and you put your foot down, you're going to be taken seriously. It's how you present yourself. It's how you present yourself, and stand up. If you see something wrong, you stand up and you say something as an official. The one thing is, I was lucky to be around a lot of really top world-class officials, when I came up. And, unfortunately, a lot of them are retiring now and they're getting older, so, and that's what scares me, is because there's not a lot of club shows. So where's the next generation going to come from?
Right. And so was your first big fight Holyfield Ruiz 3?
Probably one of my first biggest problem, I'd say, yeah, because that's when, that they were, afraid with HBO and what are they going to do, and New York, New Jersey, they didn't know what to do, and Foxwood says, you know what, we're going to throw her in.
That's such an ugly fight too.
Yeah.
Holy
But here's the thing.
Three ugly fights.
Seeing some of the stuff that I've seen, around with my dad, like I was, I was at some of the toughest, grittiest fights that I just you just do one round at a time. And that's the biggest thing. If you forget about the round before, you're fine. If you let things, sit in your head and eat you up, you're in trouble because you got to just let it go. And that was a big fight.
For your first big fight, yeah, I mean, like George said, that whole trilogy was pretty difficult even for the casual observer to watch, much less sit there and try to score rounds, because there was, just a lot of mauling and, clinching.
Yeah, it was in a book, actually, that they wrote a book. It was in, I think someone said it was in a book, a whole thing about that fight and the officials and the whole thing. But, even that, you do, and when you walk away, you're confident with your score and you don't look back. Tom Kaczmarek always said that. Your first score is your best score and don't look back.
Yeah. Was there ever a fight where, obviously judges catch heat for any kind of score that doesn't, match the consensus. What is the fight, I guess, that you felt like you took the most heat for, but yet you felt like you turned in a perfectly good score? Is there?
I don't think I'm confident in all my scores. I don't want to sit there and criticize any other officials by, bringing in any particular fight because that someone might have had it the way I do. I think the biggest thing in boxing is not to get caught up as if somebody starts doing a little bit better doesn't mean they may have won a round. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to score each round one at a time, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful. The first part of a fight could be one way. The second part of a fight could be another way. Don't get nervous. Don't worry. Don't get, and that's what people don't realize about judging. They don't pay attention to what happens in the beginning of the fight. Yep. So you could be judging, the first 5 rounds could be one way. And if they're close rounds in the beginning, you got to take that into consideration. And people don't do that. And in fact, now they have all these people that are unofficial officials, that you don't even know who they are. And they'll say, oh, that was a swing round. Oh, but that one was a close round. And then they'll criticize the officials after the fight, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. To me, I'll go round for round and say, this is what I saw. And this is what, but you got to do it live. That's another thing.
Yep.
And my father was the biggest proponent of that because you can't feel the velocity of the punch. So, even though we're all criticized, every single one of us have been, at one point being criticized.
Yeah.
And you just got to move on to the next and know that, you were correct in your score and know that you can explain your score.
Right. Yeah. There's been times that just even, if there's a big fight, I'll score round by round on like Twitter or X. And, sometimes I'll be like reluctant to put it out there because I'm like, the rest of the world doesn't seem to see it this way, because, unlike you, I think judges, you don't see your total score, right? Until the end.
No, and you're not and you're not sitting there keeping a running score or anything.
Right.
You're literally scoring one round and you're handing it in, and that's it. And you know what? At the end, when all of a sudden, someone scores like a knockdown at the near the end of the fight, you are not concerned. It is not your concern if how the rest of those rounds were scored and what the crowd's going to think and what someone's going to say about you. Because if you can't just keep going and score it the way it is, then this isn't for you. We all have thick skin, and we all just do it round for round. And at the end, when we get off our chair, there are a lot of fights that we don't even know how we had it at the end of the end of the fight. We have no idea. I mean, when you have those 114, 113s, and 115, we just don't know. And we shouldn't know because it's round for round. It's not, there's no running score. And if you're keeping a running score, then you're getting yourself in trouble. You're in trouble.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself judging again anytime soon?
Everybody wants me to start judging again, but to be honest with you, I'm, between taking care of my mom and having this new, go with the Jets and then going to Mets games and stuff, I'm having so much fun. Like I don't see anything with the boxing that would really make me wanna, I feel like part of it when my father died, part of it died inside me, and there's just so much that I'm doing, going to away games and that I couldn't do before, and hopefully next year things will turn around with the Jets because I'm still hopeful. But I just missed out on so much that I said, you know what, Max, because he's all over the place. So
But what would you say is the most what are the most exciting fights that you judged?
I still say Berto Ortiz is probably the first one, probably the most exciting one. And then Joshua and Ruiz, definitely. I mean, I can go back to like Omar Shika fights against penalty. I mean, there's a lot of those Foxwood wars, at Foxwood. Those were wars, and and fights in Philadelphia. Like that's where you got your work, and that's the sad part. I mean, Philadelphia does still have fights. That's the one place that still manages to have club fights. So there is still a place that has club fights. But to me, the best fights, I mean, Berto Ortiz, that with a knock, that when they're up and down and up and down, I love those fights.
That was crazy.
Oh my gosh, you sit there and you're like clenching the,
I was there for that one. Yeah.
Oh my
It was amazing.
I loved it. I just, then I did Guerrero, and it was a Guerrero fight I did in California. Max and I judged. It was Berto, I think. Yeah, Berto Guerrero in California. Max and I actually judged it together. It was exciting. It was just so many fights with and it was a lot of it was the same guys,
Yeah.
But then when you see them fighting now, you're like, that's what gets me a little nervous, Like, I don't want to see these guys again.
Yeah, that was 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah. So I'm someone who wants to get into boxing and be a judge. What should I do?
You start with the amateurs. And there's a lot of people I know, but the sad thing is though, when you're ready to move on, you start working amateurs about 2-3 years in the amateurs, because there still is amateur boxing. But the sad thing is there's not as many club shows to get your practice afterwards. When you finally say okay, then they have you shadow where you're not getting paid. And that was kind of like my introduction, where I wasn't going with my dad. After you're going into the Bronx and you're going, they had shows everywhere, and they see, hey, is this person good enough? Because you can be okay in the amateurs, but then you go into the pros and there's, it's all new. It's again like going from college to pro, football.
Right.
So you go through training in the amateurs. They train you, and they see, because some people get it and some people don't. Not everybody can concentrate, just that in general, for the whole time.
Yeah. Who do you contact though? Do you contact the local commission to start?
USA, the amateur boxing has nothing to do with the commission in New York. You got to go to USA Boxing and start there. Yeah, and you start there. And you start there, and you're working a lot of fights. And some people don't go pro. They stay in the amateurs. They just don't go pro.
Wow.
Do you remember the first ever fight that you judged?
Yes, it was in Long Island. It was in Huntington, Long Island, at the Huntington Hilton. And again, that's when there was a lot of club shows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was very lucky when I started. Randy Gordon licensed me, and there were so many shows for me to just sit there and shadow and practice and practice and practice and practice, which I used to do, when I sat next to my dad, when I would go to these fights. That's how this whole idea. I never thought I was going to do this. I would just sit there and, okay, I'm going to score and make the box, because that's what he would do when he was just watching. So then he would just talk to me, and I would say, okay, watch it. I mean, the biggest thing I think I ever learned was about the body shots and the liver shots and what to look for with that, because a lot of people don't, there's an art to that, and like a Terrence Crawford with the switching from righty to lefty. It was the art of boxing, which with the good commentators on HBO and Showtime, that's what people miss.
Mm-hmm. Would you and your father argue about the decision if you had it one way and he had it the other?
We didn't really argue. Sometimes we would discuss rounds. Sometimes we would discuss rounds. So there was sometimes, we didn't, get too far into it, but yeah, we would go over some rounds sometimes, that, and what we saw and what we didn't see, I know my father had more of a, like he loved a puncher. I know my father's, it's really funny. So we would sometimes, he did. He loved the banger. And there were times where, he would get really mad when someone was just, the difference between, we would study things like the difference between running and boxing. See, that's it. That was like the priceless education I got from my father, because we would sit home, we would watch fights, and because my father would call somebody a runner. All right, well, how do you differentiate a runner from a boxer? And then we watch stuff like that, fights like that, boxer, and then boxer puncher, because those are the hardest fights to judge. You people can watch Algieri Provatnikov a million times. And study. My fiance is the one who had it for Provatnikov. My father thought Provatnikov won. Steve Weisfeld thought Provatnikov won. A lot of people thought Algieri won. It's that boxer studying fights like that.
Well, thank God Algieri won, because that was his big fight, and he's been living off of that ever since.
He's still a commentator, right? He's commentating.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he's done well for himself. Nutrition, commentating. He's a good-looking guy. He's an ex-world champ now, so he's got it all going on.
He's a college grad.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's smart.
Yeah,
He's not
really smart.
Yeah, he's a good one.
And I mean, to give him credit, at the time, Provodnikov was a monster.
A monster.
Yes.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
No one wanted to fight him.
No.
So he earned it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So keep Rogers. Get a new dynamic coach.
Coaches.
Yeah,
and then you hope that they don't want to bring their own person in. But I think we need another year of this. I don't think you just throw the towel in. There's no way.
How much faith do you have in Woody to get it together?
Well, obviously he realizes he can't do it himself, so he's turned it over to some other experts. So I think that's a good sign.
If he wants Tannenbaum to find the guy, might as well rehire Tannenbaum and bring back Rex, and let's do it again.
Bring back Rex. You know what? Rex has so much passion for the Jets. And that alone, that's gonna, that passion alone, walking in. You look at the Oak. I still watch the old Hard Knocks. When Revis walked on that field, I cried. I have a prototype of Revis's cleats behind me. There's just something about Rex and the Jets in that locker room and what he brings, almost like that Dan Campbell without all that, chances, that he would take. That's what we need. And it's New York, that's another thing. Like, not everybody can make it here.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Julie, I'm glad we had you on tonight. It's been wonderful to talk to you about everything, your career and what you're doing now and enjoying life. We're happy for you.
Thank you. Oh, in March is a boxing match in New York, right? We do have a fight in New York. Davis, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get into that. But I'm in Florida, so I don't know if I'll be there for that. And it's just sad. Davis, during the press conference, was talking about he's going to retire because the sport is trash and this and that. And he's like bad-mouthing the sport. And why are you doing that? You know, you're supposed to be attracting eyeballs to the sport, and not
sad.
trying to tell everybody how disgusting the sport is. So
That's not good.
yeah,
Biting the
No.
hand that feeds.
terrible.
Yeah.
No, that's sad.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
We'll see. Hope to see you ringside real soon.
I might. Thank you.
Or maybe at MetLife.
I'm at life, definitely. Take care.